The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
The graphics card temperature has turned red. My computer is now a communist. It is joining the revolution. Or maybe I just had to switch to a Radeon card. The latter, actually. As evidenced by this Catalyst logo right here. Yeah, I had to pull the Kepler card out early. After doing some more poking around, I finally found out that the stability problems on Tuxedo were being caused by the damaged graphics card that was damaged via overclocking gone wrong. So I know what not to do next time, but that's not to say that Kepler card was ever a really good running card in the first place. So first and foremost, notice 41 degrees while the processor is in the mid-20s Celsius. Now, it's 80-something in here, so that's probably ambient. It's high 80s, high humidity outside, heat index is close to 100, it's very hot out. But I dropped back to the Radeon HD 6800 series and then overclocked the crap out of the processor and motherboard to try and compensate. Oh no, my numbers went away! So basically, I've got it doing 3.6 to 4 gigahertz turbo. 4 gigahertz turbo with the front side bus on the motherboard at 225 megahertz instead of 200. So let's run some Nova benches and try not to barbecue the rest of the system here. So there's the kind of speed differences we're looking at here as I open up Nova Bench. So it's registering as 3.6. This Radeon is so old that AMD actually doesn't have Radeon Crimson drivers for it. So I actually had to download the old Catalyst from a couple of versions ago. The card is now officially end of life. It still works, but there's not going to be any more driver updates for it. Now you consider that this thing could get up to high 1300s, low 1400s under normal working conditions. Let's see how much of a penalty we take by going back to this old Radeon card. Floating point integer, oh look at that. 4 gigahertz, watch that temperature. 50 degrees is when we start having trouble, but even in this hot weather, the processor's not capping out past 40. Once the GPU gets going, we'll take a look at that as well. I'll look at the temperature while pointing the camera at the screen. So let's get the taskbar. 41 degrees, so 1300s, 1400s versus 15s and 16s on the other one. Temp hitting the 50s, but that's about it. And that's really the principal difference between this Radeon as opposed to the Kepler card, is that the very same time this thing's breaking 50 degrees, 1319. So this thing with higher CPU, less GPU, is in the ballpark of what the 760 used to get. So instead of 570, the overclocking brings the CPU up to 630. We just get 450 instead of 500 something. Although I can never get too much from the graphics card without it being deliberately set to maximum performance mode when Nova Bench was running. It kept preferring optimal power mode and all that fun stuff. So this actually isn't all that bad, but it is a card that's no longer getting driver updates. So I'm wondering if this might be a sign of being CPU limited too, that the graphics score would hit like maybe 500 or something, but not really go much higher than the CPU. But still, we're back down to 43, now 42 degrees, and dropping. Here's the thing. The Kepler card had, the overclocking utility had like 80 degrees as a normal operating temperature. I'm sorry. I don't associate 80 degrees Celsius with a normally functioning piece of silicon. That's like a dangerously high temperature. It's too close to thermal runaway, or thermal shutdown, or thermal throttling. And at the very same time, when the graphics card gets really hot, in just about every motherboard I know of out there that's running in a tower, the graphics card is underneath the processor. So, this gets too hot, that heat is eventually going to brush, at least graze the processor and bring up the temps as well. Although we never went above 43 degrees while stressing that thing, with a max temperature of 67. I have a warning bell that goes off at 60. The thing will just start beeping endlessly, so we know that something cooled or whatever. But minimum speed's now 900 megahertz instead of 800 megahertz. But its lowest is 24, which is probably ambient. So yeah, 1300s on NovaBench. So we did a pretty good job of filling in for the Kepler card having to be removed early. And because usually I get high 13s, low 14s. In this case, with the overclocking, it's low 13s. So I'm actually still able to play World of Warcraft at close to the settings I had. Which does mean I have an old graphics card, because it goes up to 10. I was playing it at a 4 with the Kepler, dropped to a 3 for this Radeon. I wonder what the 1060 will do. Speaking of which, go ahead, review me. Okay, it's a box and it's brown. There, that's what I think of it, Newegg. Whatever. There's the old Kepler card. Yay. Actually, if we turn it sideways, we can see where, well, if I try not to hold it the certain way, the heatsink was actually lifting off on one side, and if you had it in, it would actually tilt down this way. It was a bit of a pinch point when it was in the system. But unfortunately, I was getting hard locks, freezes, and slowdowns with this thing. I don't know if I should try more thermal grease or something, but this thing ran hot. And I mean hot. So, there's been a focus on power efficiency with the Pascal architecture, and even Maxwell that came out right after this. So, for the longest time, I was wondering if I should upgrade to Maxwell. Then Pascal hit the market, and I'm like, yeah, okay. The RX 480 is an option too, but unfortunately, as we've seen, it has issues with the power draw and having to get drivers for it and things like that. But yeah, with the massive focus on power efficiency with Monolith, I decided to stay on Team Green. Plus, I'm more familiar with and find Team Green's software package for things like recording gameplay footage to be notably more refined than its Radeon equivalents. And now the new toy, Roar! This could be the last NVIDIA card that I ever get, though. If AMD can make the playing field a little more level versus what they have right now, I'd be more open to switching to Team Red later on, especially if they refine their software package. Plays TV versus NVIDIA Shadow Play, it just feels too tacked on. So let's see what we have to play with here, and whether I was correct about the heatsink, resulting in less of a pinch point in the system. The heat's messing with me, man, compared to old Kepler over there. Let's see what we have to play with. Roughly the same size. It's bigger than it looked in the pictures, that's for sure. The big thing is going to come down to the performance as well as the power consumption, because the power consumption is directly tied to how much heat these things produce. Only one 6-pin though, versus that. So it should be similar to the Radeon then. The Radeon I think just has a 6-pin one, doesn't need any 8-pin anything. Might also give me the option of downgrading my power supply as well, because I think if the wattage drops too low from a more efficient graphics card, it's going to take me out of the 2080 gold zone for 20% to 80% of load with power supplies when they're most efficient. So I might actually be making the computer less power efficient because of the power supply. We'll revisit those kilowatt hours a little later though. For now, it's time to plug in the new toy, after uninstalling all that Radeon stuff that I just put on there 2 days ago. Computers, gotta love them. But if that thing hadn't conked out early, I wouldn't have had to go back to the old Radeon. Whatever. Well, once again, old reliable, thank you for your service. Even that card's got at least half a decade on it by now. So here's what we ultimately wound up with. It's another tight squeeze, and again, the power cables are kind of pushing this way, so that's why this needs to be the card that goes into Monolith. I don't want this in here for years, because that regular pressure was what caused probably one of the sources of the problems anyways with the Kepler card. Just one 6-pin, but the thing I find most interesting is this right here. There's actually some airspace going this way, as opposed to the heatsink the fins going the other way. As if this could actually benefit from some side cooling, as opposed to needing front-back cooling with the other one, because that's the only way the heatsink fins would go. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to reinstall a 120 millimeter side fan to blow some cool air towards this thing. And I actually have an option available to bolt a fan onto the outside of the case to blow air directly in that way as well. I actually cut some of the honeycomb stuff so I can put wires through the side of the case and have a fan on the outside, because this cooler doesn't leave any room for any side fans on the inside of the case. I also have it going in push-pull because it's summertime, with a 120 fractal on the other side and the regular fan with the PWM headers on the other side. So could replace this with a pressure fan from Fractal if I really wanted to, but the processor isn't going that much above 40 degrees with a max temperature of 67 Celsius. So I'm more concerned about how hot this thing's gonna run once it's 100%. But what I think I'll do is I'll bring back a side fan just for the GPU so air can blow this way into this little vent right here. I think there is a heatsink. Yeah, there are heatsink fins going the other way, but it looks like there's multiple options available for getting some airflow in this card to try and move the heat around. That's rather interesting. Let's put it back together and see how it all runs. There we go. 2 out of 4 screws in the diagonal corners with the fan a little crooked, because this honeycomb really wasn't made for fans. I've just been hack jobbing it with these fatty screws. The only way to get 4 screws is to have the fan come up here somewhere and have this piece get blocked, which I don't really want. I want more air for whatever can come in the side and go straight to the graphics card. And this, obviously, as you can see with the graphics card right there, is the perfect position for it, even though it looks stupid. Hey, what can I say? Tuxedo is a machine whose days have been numbered for years. Just I haven't really had anything exciting to replace it with yet. It's very outdated and very hack job, but I imagine for some of you, that's exactly the sort of computer you want to see in these videos, as opposed to that overproduced, pristine, sparkly stuff that the big channels have. Let's fire it back up, darn it! 90 degrees outside now. As Dark Helmet said in Spaceballs, hot! Too hot! By the way, something I forgot to mention earlier, those nice looking blue 90-degree SATA cables that you might have noticed on the drives, that's the new SKU from Monoprice. Way better built and a lot sturdier. We're just waiting for these NVIDIA drivers to download to switch from red back to green. This could be my last NVIDIA card very, very easily. If AMD really comes back with a vengeance in the next couple of years, I might be looking at Radeon and make all the adored TV fans really, really happy. For now, though, I want to stick with what I know and modernize it, give it a little bit of punch. Plus, for the remainder of Tuxedo's useful life, this card is probably going to be overkill for it. I'm hearing this card's actually overkill for 1080p in the first place. Either that or the 1070, one of those two. But the good news is, because I want to stick with 1080 for the time being, things are going to get very cheap for me until I start tossing around maybe the idea of going to 4K. But before that happens, this TV needs to burn out, and I need to not feel like getting another 1080p TV to replace it. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Now this is what I'm talking about right here. 90 out. 28, oh that's Fahrenheit. 27 Celsius on the processor, 40 Celsius on the GPU. So these numbers already look similar to the Radeon, except with far newer silicon and far better performance, I'll bet. Let's fire up NovaBench and see what we have to play with here. What are we... okay. It's detecting properly as a 1066 gig. I think they're all 6 gigs at that level. 3.6, everything else being the same. Let's see what we get here. As well as speed temperature in the corner. Floating points. We'll do the same thing as we did with the Radeon, except we've got a green number in the corner instead of a red number. My concern, CPU limited by the 5-year-old processor. We'll see if it happens. Also, NVIDIA installs its driver... NVIDIA defaults the driver to optimal power mode. So I'm probably going to have to do this again with prefer maximum performance selected. Okay, well, let's see here. 18s, 19s, and 45 degrees. But that's in power. This is better numbers than the Radeon, both in terms of performance and the temperature, which of course tells me I'm probably doing better on wattage too. Now after this drive test, we end up with a result of 1475. 628 on the CPU and now 606 on the graphics processor, but I'll bet any money that that is in optimal power mode. If I set it so that NovaBench prefers maximum performance, how much better does it get? 1475 and 2 600s. We're already doing better than the Kepler card. The Kepler would do like 4s and 5s. As predicted, the default setting is optimal power, so I'm going to put in a program setting for NovaBench to override that with maximum performance mode, and then hit save on that. Might do that with World of Warcraft too, but I'll see what kind of frame rates I can get in power save mode with this sucker. I'm really liking this thing so far. Definite improvement over the Kepler card, and the computer hasn't froze or slowed down or whatever. Uh-oh. Thunderstorm! I better get this over with quick. That was weather bug. Yeah, let's get this over with and get the video done quickly before we have to shut everything off. I wouldn't want the computer to get zapped by a lightning strike right after putting a new graphics card in it. Cancel that! It's an excessive heat warning! You don't say! But we're still sitting at 40 and 28, even though it's, well, 89. Ooh, we dropped a degree Fahrenheit outside. Okay, what kind of a difference does it make going from optimal power to maximum performance? Can we break 1500 with this overclock setting without anything cooking? Let's go! We haven't set up the sound yet for the HDMI. We'll play with that in a bit. Floating point into jar. Something. I'm also experimenting with double HDMI, where I put it in duplicate mode, going out to the television and the AV receiver, and send the sound to the AV receiver multi-channel over HDMI and not need a sound card. So I can basically have the option of not turning the amp on in the morning when I go to do stuff. Alright, 15, 15, 16, and we're not really gaining much in terms of temperatures. I think we're CPU limited, or something. How come changing the power mode to maximum performance actually hurt the numbers? See what we get here. 1388. And the graphics is now 512. Let's change the global setting. The global setting is now prefer maximum performance, and the performance mode is set to optimize performance for a single display. Let's see if we can get towards the 2000 mark on the 800 by 600 segment. Here we go. 18, 18, 18, 19, woo, 17, but it's still only 46 degrees. 16, 18, 17, etc. Much better thermal results. What do we get for NovaBench for cranking it up to max performance mode now? 1479. It's still 2 6s. We might be looking at some CPU limiting after all. Regardless, I'm going to set it back to optimal power mode and try World of Warcraft, see if the thing can handle it. I got it at setting 4. Can I run it at like settings 5 and 6 now that I have a newer GPU in this thing? We have a power problem on our hands. The system worked for a grand total of a couple minutes before all the freezes and the hard locks came back. So if I have a graphics card that is above a certain level of performance, and I imagine versus its 5-year-old counterpart, it's probably above a certain level of wattage too, all the stability goes completely out the door. This has been stuck here for who knows how long, and we're going to have to hard switch this sucker. That is not good. So this vindicates the Kepler card. But what this also means is that I'm going to have to move forward with those plans I had to gut the power supply from the Silver Bullet, which is a lower wattage power supply, and put that in, because apparently the PC power and cooling supply that I've been using for the last couple of years, maybe it's getting too hot or something. I mean, it only has one 92mm fan to cool it. It doesn't spin very fast, and it's on fan number 2. So fitting that this ends with a blue screen. But it looks like the Kepler card's been vindicated and can be a proper backup card for the Silver Bullet. What I really need to do is get a new power supply, preferably one where I'll be in the 80-20 range for wattage draw. Well now, that could have gone a lot better. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.